I got involved in kids' books because I was an art teacher doing freelance work for the Age newspaper, and they'd send out a bloke. This is in the 80s, pre-computers. Send out a bloke on a motorbike, and he'd have the story, and he'd say, "I'll be back in an hour to collect the drawing," and the story would be like something that I was completely had no idea about, politics or finance. So what I did is I'd do a ridiculous drawing, a crazy drawing, and then pick a line of text and sit it with it, driven by panic, really. But what happened is that because the picture and the text were completely different, somehow it came across as being ironic. And around this time, I was asked to illustrate someone's book, and I illustrated a few books, but wasn't that interested because I couldn't engage with the characters. They're cutesy pie books. That's all right, but I'm not interested. And I came up with Old Tom, but it was rejected by about 4 publishers. And what I do is I'd do a drawing of Old Tom doing something in a line of text which had a different meaning to the drawing, and a publisher said yes, or an editor said yes at Penguin, and I've been with her ever since, 30 years. Well, the bloke that's the biggest influence, and I'm not even a tenth of his talent, is Ronald Searle, the English cartoonist, who was brilliant. Born in 1920, died in 2011, and I was lucky enough to have a correspondence with him, obviously, before he died. He was the big inspiration. I mean, every I hate that word illustrator, every artist, illustrator, cartoonist worth their salt acknowledges that he is to cartoons what Mozart is to classical music. I get an initial idea that comes out of left field. I've started drawing in sketchbooks so I can, because I used to just draw on bits of paper and I'd get them lost. But I get an initial idea, like for the new Mr. Chicken book, Mr. Chicken Goes to Mars. I just love the idea of Mr. Chicken going to Mars. It's so stupid. So I did a few drawings of him sitting on a rocket ship, which turned into him sitting in a rocket ship. Then I thought, I'll have another character in it. So he's got Boris the rocket builder. So he loves the idea of going to Mars. It's one place he's never been. So you turn the page, so there he is. He goes and orders a rocket ship. What's fabulous about kids, doing work for kids, is that they'll follow you anywhere if you engage them. Whereas, an adult might say, well, that doesn't look like a chicken. I say, well, I don't ever say Mr. Chicken's a chicken. His name's Mr. Chicken. That's what he looks like. The beaut thing is a kid will accept that. And so there are never gaps in logic for kids, because the kids will fill it in, It gives them a chance to add something to the story. So my books are basically character studies. And there are lots of gaps of logic, obviously. Mr. Chicken changes size in each page. The kids don't worry about that. And I've learnt as much from the kids, I think, as I've taught them. I did a thing at Bordertown years and years ago, and I was on stage in the theatre there. And at question time, a kid said, "Why? I've looked at your Old Tom books, and each page, Old Tom is a different size. Why is that?" And I had no idea. I didn't know. I thought, oh, well, I'll see if I can find out why. And I said, does anyone know why? And a little kid said, yes, I've looked at it and I've worked out that when Old Tom is being told off or ticked off by Angela, he's small. When he's being really naughty, and the kid used the word bold, which was fabulous. When he's being really naughty and bold, Old Tom is big. And later on, I said, that's exactly right. And I went back and looked at the books, and it's true. But I do it unconsciously, intuitively. And I've got this fabulous relationship with my editor, Erica Wagner, the one person that said yes to Old Tom 30 years ago, where we sit and just spark off each other. It's terrific. Well, Old Tom was my first character, and I wanted something. I think it was a reaction against being asked or commissioned to illustrate books that, for me, didn't have characters that I could engage with. And I wanted to do. I am a softie. I'm a bit, in fact, a romantic underneath. But what I didn't want to do is to do a character that was drippy. And I don't even like cats. I'm very much a dog person. I chose a cat because I thought cats are more like this. You know, they're independent and, a bit bolshy, whereas dogs sort of want to be your friend. So I thought of Old Tom. At first he had a cigar and all that. He looked like a gangster. So he's sort of developed into what he looks like now. And I wanted him, I thought kids will like him. So really I write the Old Tom books as if he's a naughty 7-year-old boy. Angela is meant to be sort of a prissy woman that likes order and likes living on her own. And so he comes in and it's about opposites. Really, it's about a mother and a son. That's the relationship. I was very fortunate. I had terrific parents that were quite conservative. Dad was a school teacher and Mum was a dressmaker. And though I had the usual adolescent fight with them, long hair and all that, which lasted 40 years, I never ever felt unloved. And as I get older, now I sort of appreciate it more than ever. You don't realise it when you're young or a kid. And they both were terribly very supportive of me doing art, even though they never really got the sort of art that I did. They certainly didn't get Mr. Chicken or Old Tom. They liked Mr. Badger and Fiona because they were sort of more normal, I suppose. But, Mr. Chicken, they just was way off the radar, Well, I suppose I never set out to make them funny. I don't know, they just end up, I suppose some people don't find them funny. But when Erica, my editor, and I are working together, we often laugh and she'll say, oh, that's hilarious. And so I personally think humour is very important. I think it's underappreciated. I think in the arc of things, there's all sorts of different humour. My humour isn't the bum sort of humour. That's fine, but that's never been my cup of tea. I like irony, and I think I use humour in a way to cover up a vein of good-heartedness which I like to think runs through my characters and my stories. I like the ending to be one where the kids are happy. Old Tom comes back home. He realises that he'd rather be with Angela than be a celebrity or something. I mean, these are all cliches, but it doesn't matter. It's how you tell them, how you put them across. I only had 2 ambitions as a kid, only 2. One was to be an artist and the other one was to go to England, because as a kid I drew castles and pirates and things, so it was just, I had to get to England. And that church you see behind the bus is St Martin in the Fields. And for nearly 50 years, every time I go to London, I stand on the steps of St Martin in the Fields and look out over Trafalgar Square, and on my right is the National Gallery, and here's the National Portrait Gallery. And I think I've done it, 50 million miles, the expense, the time, but I've actually made it back. And that bus that he's in, Waterloo 139, that's one of my favourite buses. It crosses Waterloo Bridge. But the number 11 bus goes right up past St Paul's to Liverpool Street Station. And that really is me in the bus. There have been 3 times. Once at Hermannsburg, 20 years ago, and then 2 times while I was the laureate. Once at Pernalulu, and another time I was at Nicolamungala. And Pernalulu and Nicolamungala was sponsored, I think, was by ASWA. And they were marvellous experiences. I think I was there for a week. We didn't live in the community, we'd go there every day. But it was fantastic working with Indigenous kids because they were, like all kids, up for fun. But it was marvellous seeing, like, for instance, one little kid made a little film about Mr. Chicken, and he's walking along the desert and plunges into the billabong and meets Mrs. Chicken. And the kid narrated it. It was hilarious. But what was interesting is that they wanted to work with Mr. Chicken, but they put him in the Australian landscape, and sort of painted him with all sorts of stuff. And I met some of the parents, but it was a profoundly moving experience. So that in fact was a highlight of my laureateship. And it was wonderful seeing how art is so much part of their way of expressing themselves. Because, there are a few reasons. One is because, as a kid, libraries were fabulous, but that could be made invalid now because people say, 60 years ago there weren't digital things. But my experience in libraries as a kid was so positive. That's how I discovered Ronald Searle. As a teacher, libraries were fabulous because I saw them as safe havens for kids in the context of pastoral care. So some kids don't want to be out in the yard, and libraries and a librarian can steer a kid towards, I can give you an example, and I've got his permission. One of when I was at University High School teaching, there was a kid that didn't quite fit in, and he sort of hung around the library, and my friend the librarian steered him towards particular books. That bloke now is the film critic for The Age. And when I was made the laureate, I got in touch with him because I wanted to mention this in my speech about libraries. And this bloke said, don't just mention that. You say that everything that I've learnt that's worthwhile as far as my career, the library was the touchstone for that.